Yes, I do.
When's the first time that you saw this statement?
All right.
We can pull the exhibit back up. Thank you. Mr. Depp, when is the first time that you saw this statement by Mr. Waldman?
The first time that I ever saw this statement was in August. It was when the piece was when she August 2020, when I was countersued by Ms. Heard. This is the first time that I saw any of these statements.
Can we please pull up Defendants Exhibit 1246? And this is also already in evidence.
All right.
Thank you. If we could scroll down to the second page, or the third perhaps. Thank you. Mr. Depp, do you see this statement that's attributed to Mr. Waldman here?
I do.
And when is the first time that you saw these statements?
Same, when the countersuit was filed.
And could we please go to Defendants Exhibit 1247? And again, this is already in evidence. And if we could scroll down, please, thank you. Mr. Depp, do you see the statement attributed to Mr. Waldman?
I do indeed, yes.
And when's the first time that you saw this statement?
This is the same. It's the counterclaim to August 2020.
After you saw these statements for the first time, did you form an understanding as to where they appeared?
I didn't, as to where they had appeared, these statements.
In what publication?
No, off the bat, I didn't know exactly. It just seemed like a lot of word salad to me. I didn't know where they'd come from, or I mean, where they ended up. Or
Mr. Depp, do you recall Ms. Heard testifying that you did not assist her in getting her role in Aquaman?
Yes, I do, yes.
And what is your response to that? It's not exactly true. Do you know when Ms. Heard first auditioned for Aquaman?
Strangely, I know the date. Well, no, yes, I do know the date, because I was scheduled with my band, the Hollywood Vampires. We had done 2 shows at the Roxy, which is a place in Los Angeles, to rehearse for we were invited to play at the Rock in Rio concert, which is a huge rock and roll festival So we did the 2 shows to go to Rio and play there. Miss Heard wanted to come with me, and Whitney, her sister, had come as well. While we were there in Rio, we were rehearsing, getting ready for the show. Miss Heard informed me that she would have to get back to Los Angeles for an audition, meaning it's basically after our 2-hour show or whatever, we would have to get on the plane immediately to make it back to Los Angeles for this audition. And that audition was at Warner Brothers. It was whatever film it was.
And when were you performing at the Rock in Rio?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that was I believe it was the 24th of September.
In what year?
That was 15.
What do you understand happened after Ms. Heard auditioned for Aquaman?
After Ms. Heard's audition, or possibly auditions, for Warner Brothers and I suppose the creative team, Ms. Heard had expressed to me that the film was going to be, Warner Brothers had said that the film was going to be shooting in Australia. And Australia was for Ms. Heard, that was a potential problem, which...
Objection, Your Honor. We approach.
Okay.
I apologize, Mr. Depp. Could you please continue? What happened after Ms. Heard auditioned for Aquaman?
I was informed by Ms. Heard that the film was going to be shooting in Australia, and that was of concern to her, and because it was of concern to Warner Brothers. So she asked if I would, because I'd had a multi, for a few years I'd had a multi-film deal with Warner Brothers, and so we'd been in business together. So I knew these people. I'd been on films with them. So she asked me if I would speak to them. I made a phone call and I spoke to.
Objection, hearsay, Your Honor.
I don't believe he said anything. I think he was going to say who he spoke to.
All right, we'll see. Overruled at this point.
I spoke to the three upper echelon Warner executives: Kevin Tsujihara, Sue Kroll, and Greg Silverstein. And I told them that.
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay.
All right, I'll sustain the objection. Next question.
What was the result of you speaking with those individuals?
Well, I can only say that ultimately she did get the job in the film. So hopefully I suppose I had curbed their worries to some degree.
Mr. Depp, do you recall Ms. Heard testifying that she saw you consume 8 to 10 MDMA pills while you were in Australia in March of 2015?
Yes, I do remember that.
How
I
many?
also remember her saying that I took a handful.
Objection beyond the scope. Question.
Sorry, that was extra residue.
All right, I'll sustain the objection. Next question.
How many times have you done MDMA in your life, Mr. Depp?
Actually, not that many times. I would say in my lifetime, MDMA 6, 7, maybe.
And how much MDMA have you done on those occasions?
Not enough to properly. Well, not enough to properly experience what the chemicals are supposed to do to you.
Have you ever consumed 8 to 10 MDMA pills at once?
No, ma'am. No, I have not.
And why is that?
Because I'd be dead. I'm pretty sure I'd be dead. I think one would die. Yes, and probably rather quickly.
Mr. Depp, I'd like to show you some pictures from the home in Australia that Ms. Heard testified about.
Sure.
Could we please pull up Defendants Exhibit 1817, which is already in evidence? Mr. Depp, do you recognize what's depicted in this photograph?
Yes, I do. That's the downstairs bar of the house we rented in Australia.
And can you please show the jury where you were sitting when Ms. Heard threw the 2 vodka bottles at you?
If I touch this thing, it'll make a
Yes,
mark.
it will.
Yes. Okay. So this chair, that one here, was over here. And it was in pretty much when I was turned around they were on a swivel, so when I was turned around towards the bar, I'm facing the bar. When I turned around this way, this chair here was in pretty much exactly this same position as this chair. It was when I was facing Miss Heard, who was, let's say she was, if you're looking at the photograph, she would be about here.
Could you draw a line in the direction where Miss Heard was relative to where you were sitting?
Yes, absolutely. So if I'm sitting here, she was over here, like back here.
Approximately how far away from Miss Heard, from you was Miss Heard, if you can recall?
I would say it was probably 10, 12, 15 feet, maybe 10 feet, 12 feet.
And approximately where was your hand when the vodka bottle hit it?
It was leaning. My arm was my arm was leaning on the marble bar, right there where the imaginary seat is, and leaning, kind of just leaning back and looking at Miss Heard. She just walked away with the second bottle. I mean, she walked this way when she threw the first bottle, which is actually visible in the background on the floor.
Yeah. Could you please circle where the first bottle
Oh,
is?
sorry, excuse me. Yeah. All that is the exploded first bottle that went past my went past my head, and the second bottle hit right up here where my hand was resting on the marble bar.
Can we please pull up Defendants Exhibit 1820? Mr. Depp, do you recognize what's depicted in this photograph?
This is behind that very bar.
And what do you see on the floor in this picture?
I see what looks to me like some kind of napkin. It looks sullied, soiled, blood, I don't know. And I see glass in the corner, blood obviously on the floor, and a towel leaning up on something.
Do you know how that bloody tissue got on the floor?
My best guess.
Objection calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Do you know how the blood got on the floor, Mr. Depp?
I know how the blood got on the floor. It came from my dripping finger, so that's why the tissue is. I'm 99.9% sure, since it is. Looks like it's got blood on it as well. Is what I held my finger with.
Do you see the wall on the left side of the photograph?
I do.
Was there a wall-mounted phone on that wall?
On the left side of the photo. No, I didn't. No. Not that I recall. No.
Could we please pull up Defendants Exhibit 394, which is already in evidence?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Depp, do you recognize this text message?
I do.
And what is this message?
It's a text to Dr. Kipper. I'm sorry, just reading through.
Sure.
Yeah, this is my text to Dr. Kipper, who had just happened to be in town, telling him that I've had it and that I just lost a fingertip.
How long after your finger had been injured did you send this text message, if you can recall?
It's hard to tell because when I look at the timestamp, it says delivered 3/7/2015, 5 o'clock. But I know that because of Australia time, it was the 8th, and it was probably, the whole thing lasted probably until about 2 p.m. Or so, and that was when Kipper was called, Jerry was brought in, Jerry Judge, sorry, excuse me.
So do you have an estimate as to how long after your finger had actually been injured that you sent this message?
I don't think it was very long. I think it was probably within the next, I'm sure it was in the next half hour or so. I would have had to sneak into a bathroom, lock myself in to type this out.
And how were you able to send this text message to Dr. Kipper in the state that you were in?
Well, he wasn't available at the time, so just sort of thumb your way through, don't you?
How long after sending this text message did you see Dr. Kipper?
I don't recall, but I think it took them probably 30 minutes or more, 30 to 40 minutes to get there.
And what did Dr. Kipper do when he first arrived at the home?
Oh, the first thing he wanted to do was inspect the damage of my finger and try and figure out exactly what had happened, how it happened.
And what did you tell Dr. Kipper about how your finger had been injured?
Objection, Your Honor.
May we approach?
Hearsay. We've
right,
discussed
that's
this
fine.
several times.
Let's go.
Mr. Depp, when Dr. Kipper was treating your finger, what did you tell him about how your finger became injured?
I told him that there was obviously, I mean, when you saw the damage in the house and everything, and the blood everywhere, I mean, obviously there was serious damage done. There would be no point in lying to the man. He'd been through it with me and Ms. Herb before. I told him that she had thrown a bottle of vodka and smashed and cut my finger off, the tip of my finger, but a good chunk. I miss it.
Mr. Depp, you heard Ms. Heard testify about an alleged incident of abuse on your honeymoon. Do you remember that?
I remember her testifying to that, yes.
And when did you and Ms. Heard go on your honeymoon together?
I believe it was somewhere in the neighborhood of August, because I just finished the film. Maybe end of July, August. I'm not quite good on the exact date.
Do you recall the year?
It was 2015, I believe.
And where did you and Ms. Heard go on your honeymoon?
We took the Orient Express from Bangkok, Thailand to Singapore.
And what happened while you and Ms. Heard were together on the Orient Express?
There were times when it was very agreeable, very nice. And then there were times when something had become dissatisfactory for her, and she would start the rant, the blooming of a fight would be on deck there, and at one point, it didn't. I mean, I don't remember it lasting long at all. I just remember that I took a pretty good shot to the face, to the eye, to somewhere up here. So I had a bit of a shiner. But it all ended, and then everything got fine again, and we'd go to dinner, and it was all fine.
Did Ms. Heard ever apologize to you for giving you the shiner?
I don't recall.
Can we please pull up Plaintiff's Exhibit 162, which is already in evidence? Mr. Depp, do you recognize this photograph?
I do. It was with the chef and the maitre d' and the staff were asking if they could take a photo with us, and they'd been very kind. They'd given us a private dinner card.
So where was this photograph taken?
That was in the, that looks like it's in the, yes, that's towards the back of the Orient Express. That's in the back train bar compartment. And just out back, you could smoke on the sort of caboose or whatever.
And what, if any, injuries do you have in this photograph?
I think the eye's a little bit bugged out, if you will. It's, yeah.
How did that happen?
These things could happen very quickly if you disagreed.
Objection, Your Honor, non-responsive. She just asked, how did that happen?
I believe he was about to explain.
Well, I'll sustain the objection.
Okay. So, Mr. Depp, specifically, how did the injury in this photograph occur?
I'm sure it hit me. Is that better?
Does this picture accurately reflect what you looked like on that date?
I don't look at myself much, but it certainly looks like me with a black eye.
Does this picture appear to have been photoshopped in any way?
No, no. I think it would be difficult to photograph or to start getting into sort of digital processing with a number of people in the shot, especially in a wide shot.
Could we please pull up Plaintiff's Exhibit 1301? And this is a new one, Your Honor, so this is not in evidence.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Depp, do you recognize what's reflected in this photograph?
Yes, this is the staff. It's the manager and his staff at the Raffles Hotel in Singapore. And before we left, they asked if they could take a photograph with us.
And when was this photograph taken?
Well, that would have been, we were off the Orient Express. We stayed in Raffles, I believe, a couple of days, few days. And then from there we flew to San Francisco.
So this photograph was taken after the photograph we just looked at?
This photograph was taken after the photograph in the dining car of the train, yes.
Your Honor, I'd move Plaintiff's Exhibit 1301 into
All right,
evidence.
any objection?
Happy honeymoon. So it's 31st of October.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, 1301 is in evidence, can be published to the jury.
Mr. Depp, what, if any, injuries do you see on your face in this photograph?
I see pretty much the same. I see that the area in here has been is swollen and yeah, there's a bit of a shiner there.
Thank you. We can take this down. Mr. Depp, do you recall Ms. Heard testifying that she punched you in the staircase incident because she thought of Kate Moss in the stairs?
Do I remember her saying that?
Yes.
Yes, I do. 3 times. Yes, I do.
Do you have any understanding as to what Ms. Heard was referring to?
Yes, I do.
And
As Kate Moss, Kate testified, it was many, many years ago. And exactly what happened is what she said happened. I recall speaking with Ms. Heard about that very incident because of the downpouring of rain, because it was raining very heavily that day that Kate slipped. And I recalled the story to her.
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay.
may we approach Your Honor?
Okay.
Please continue, Mr. Depp. What did you tell Ms. Heard about the staircase, or Kate Moss.
I'll make it easy for Mr. Rottenborn. Miss Heard took the story and turned it into a very ugly incident, all in her mind. There was never a moment where I pushed Kate down any set of stairs, yet she's spewed this 3 times before.
Objection, Your Honor. Ms. Heard simply testified that she had heard a rumor, and that's
What's a rumor?
non-responsive to the question.
Sir, hold on. This
Sorry.
objection. I'll overrule the objection.
Misstates the facts and evidence.
I'll overrule the objection.
Sorry, I was drawn by Mr. Rottenborn's voice.
Certainly.
What was you like? What was it?
So what specifically had you actually told Ms. Heard about the incident with Miss Moss and the stairs?
Very simply that we were in Jamaica. I had left our bungalow about 3 minutes prior to her. I was standing outside, and suddenly rain starts just coming down like it's, monsoon. And then I remember looking and seeing Kate coming out the door, and there were 3 little wooden stairs, and she slipped, her legs went up, and she landed directly on her coccyx and her lower back. So, and she was obviously physically in pain, and she was hurt, she was crying. So I ran over and grabbed her to make sure she was all right. That's it. That's all I ever. That's the whole story. But then the rumor of it, I'd never heard a rumor of that before Miss Heard grabbed hold of it. It's like that. Sorry.
Mr. Depp, we heard testimony from Miss Heard's sister, Whitney, during this trial. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And how would you describe your relationship with Whitney when you were in a relationship with Miss Heard?
I liked Whitney very much. Initially, when I first met her, I liked her very much, and grew to love Whitney very much, because I always, it seemed, Whitney, Amber's sister, Whitney, seemed to always get the sort of dirty end of the stick, and I felt bad for her for that, because it wasn't new. It had been there for life, and that was seemed pretty obvious. So I took to Whitney very, very quickly, very easily. She was a very sweet kid. She was wonderful.
What do you mean that Whitney got the dirty end of the stick?
It was a kind of a strange combination of loving sister, trusted sister and friend, and then lackey, and then, either the punching bag or the dartboard, or the recipient of some rather demeaning and ugly words, or she would have wine thrown in her face.
And who was the source of those demeaning words and the wine that you just referenced?
Well, that would be Amber Heard, her sister.
And how do you know that?
Well, I witnessed quite a lot of it. The wine in the face was something that happened in New York, which I think that even made it into the papers. I believe that even made it into the papers. It was in an elevator.
How did you first learn about that incident?
Miss Hurd told me in detail.
What else did you observe of Miss Hurd and her sister Whitney's interactions during your relationship with Miss Hurd?
They were just constantly up and down, but I could sense, I could feel that Whitney was trying to please her sister, trying to be up to snuff, and it just seemed like she got shot down.
Objection, Your Honor. This has gone beyond the scope of the question or his foundation for knowledge of that.
Your Honor, I asked what he observed, between them. I think this is responsive to that.
And his testimony as to what Whitney felt is.
I'll sustain the objection. Next question.
Okay. Did you ever see Miss Hurd physically attack Whitney?
No, I've never seen any full-on blowouts, physical blowouts between them. Tons of verbal blowouts.
Objection beyond the scope.
Overruled.
I've certainly seen Miss Hurd grab Whitney, push her around. There were a number. There were half a dozen times when some of us, whoever was in the general vicinity, would have to leave. This is at Orange, when Whitney and Amber were living at Orange. Whitney and her boyfriend at the time, Sean Krajewski, and we had to leave the apartment and
Why
wait
was
in the car while they fought.
And when you say fought, do you mean physically or?
Physical.
And when you said Miss Hurd would push Whitney around, do you mean that to physically push her or metaphorically?
Both.
You heard Whitney testify that she lived in Penthouse 4 at the Eastern Columbia building for a time, correct?
That is correct, yes.
How did Whitney come to live in Penthouse 4?
My recollection when Whitney first came to stay at the Eastern Columbia building in Penthouse 4 was she and her boyfriend, Sean, had broken up. And she needed a place to go. And so Amber asked if she could stay in Penthouse 4, and I said, well, of course, of course, you know.
How long did Whitney live in Penthouse 4?
It was well over a year, on and off.
Did you ever ask Whitney to move out of Penthouse 4?
No, I did not, no.
Why did Whitney ultimately move out of Penthouse 4?
Objection, foundation.
It's his apartment, Your Honor. He was living there.
Oh, overruled.
Whitney moved out of Penthouse 4 long before the marriage, and it was due to an argument that Ms. Hurd and Whitney had, which had to do with Whitney working at the Art of Elysium with Jennifer Howell and those people. And Amber asked her to leave, get out.
Where did Whitney live when she moved out of Penthouse 4?
My understanding is she went to live with Jennifer Howell.
Your Honor, I know you anticipated having a motion at noon.
You can keep going, that's
Okay.
fine. We can. How much longer in direct do you have?
I have a bit.
Okay, that's okay.
Mr. Depp, do you recall hearing testimony during Ms. Heard's case from Mr. Mandel?
Yes, I do.
And who is that?
Mr. Mandel is my former business manager of 17 and a half years, who at a certain point I discovered had been embezzling quite a lot of money. So I had to take action against him and he and my lawyer of 17 and a half years, as they were in cahoots, as it were. And so yes, Joel Mandel is, and they settled their case with me. They made their settlement. But yes, it was the big. That was a very Joel Mandel is a very bitter man who ended up with a lot of money that I worked hard for over the years.
Do you recall Mr. Mandel testifying in this case that you do not spend very much money on charity?
That I don't. Sorry.
That you do not spend very much money on charity.
Objection, Your Honor.
You just want to
Can we
approach?
approach?
Okay.
Mr. Depp, just to remind you, my question was, what is your response to Mr. Mandel's testimony that you do not spend very much on charity?
My response to that is Mr. Mandel is a very bitter man, and one thing about that, myself personally, with regard to charity donations, sending money to a charity, I prefer, I would rather that my name were not on it. I don't want the name to be the important thing or the thing that people talk about. So when I donate money, I donate without my name being involved because I don't see that that's important, my name being there in terms of money. Now, if I am able to visit hospitals, or if I'm able to meet with Make-A-Wish children, I have held on to the relationships that I've held on to within the Make-A-Wish Foundation and the Children's Hospital and various other places. Then obviously my name is involved. When we held premieres in Leicester Square for several films, Charlie and the
Objection, Your Honor.
Chocolate Factory.
Again, beyond the scope of his response to Mr. Mandel's testimony.
I believe this is in response to Mr. Mandel.
I'll overrule the objection.
So basically, when it was a public, let's call it donation or whatever, I would talk to the studio. I would talk to Disney. I would talk to Warner Brothers. I would talk to whoever the studio was, well before the premiere, and make the premiere a benefit that would, once we did what we benefited, we did a benefit premiere for Great Ormond Street Hospital. We did a couple of benefit premieres for the Make-A-Wish Foundation. I mean, if you can turn a premiere with that many thousands and thousands and thousands of people there into a benefit, it works and it helps, but it wasn't presented under my name, you know. It was Disney's doing this or Warner Brothers is doing this. I'm not looking for the pat on the back, as it were. If I can make it happen, great. But I don't need the pat on the back. I don't need the adulation. I don't need the attention.
Did you hear Ms. Heard testify that one of the charities she donated a portion of your divorce settlement to was the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles?
Yes.
What is your relationship with the CHLA?
Objection, Your Honor. Irrelevant to the issue.
May we
just
approach Your
discussed.
Honor? Mr. Depp, what is your relationship with the CHLA?
I've had a relationship with the CHLA for probably 20 years or so.
And what's the nature of that relationship?
Well, essentially, you know, sometimes there are Make-A-Wish kids who are in the hospital there, and that their wishes to.
Objection, Your Honor.
Your Honor, may we approach? Mr. Depp, I'd like to take you back to exactly 6 years prior to this week, the week of May 21st through May 27th, 2016. What happened at the beginning of that week?
May 21st.
Excuse me, May 20th.
May 20th. We're talking 2016 here.
Yes.
May 20th, the afternoon of May 20th, afternoon, evening, my mom made her exit. She'd been fighting cancer numerous times and for many years, and she fought all the way to the end. And so my mother passed away on the 20th of May. Which does bring instant perspective into one's mind. I spoke to Amber that night. I called her on the telephone, explained to her that my mom had passed, Betty Sue had passed, and that I thought that the best thing we could do was to that I file for
Objection, Your Honor.
divorce.
Hearsay. What Mr. Depp told Ms. Heard.
We can move on, Your
Okay,
Honor.
yes, ma'am.
Mr. Depp, what happened at the end of that week on May 27th, 2016?
May 27th, my daughter's birthday. May 27th, I was not in Los Angeles. I was on the way to on tour, and that was when Miss Heard went for the restraining order. And oh yeah, also that was the day that Alice Through the Looking Glass, a film I'd done, was opening.
Did Miss Heard know that you were out of town on May 27th?
Yes.
And how would she have known that?
Well, I told her I was going on tour. I mean, that was well established.
How long were you going to be out of town on that tour?
2 to 3 months.
And did Miss Heard know how long you'd be out of town?
I don't know if she knew exactly how long I'd be out of town, but it was a pretty extensive tour of Europe.
How did Miss Heard's actions on May 27th, 2016 affect you?
Changed everything.
Objection, Your Honor. relevance.
Oh, it didn't change
to this
everything?
lawsuit.
Sorry.
Mr. Hurd, if you could wait till the objection, please.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Relevance.
Tourette's.
Your Honor, this is one of the key
If you want to
dates.
approach, that's good.
Mr. Depp, what has it been like for you to listen to Ms. Hurd's testimony at this trial?
I'm sorry.
What has it been like for you to listen to Ms. Hurd's testimony at this trial?
Objection, relevance, Your Honor.
Oh, overruled.
Insane. It's insane to hear heinous accusations of violence, sexual violence, that she's attributed to me, that she's accused me of. I don't think anyone enjoys having to split themselves open and tell the truth. But there are times when one just simply has to, because it's gotten out of control. Horrible. ridiculous, humiliating, ludicrous, painful, savage, unimaginably brutal, cruel, and all false. All false. I wanted I no human being is perfect, certainly not. None of us. But I have never in my life committed sexual battery, physical abuse, all these outlandish, outrageous stories of me committing these things and living with it for 6 years and waiting to be able to bring the truth out. So this is not easy for any of us. I know that. But no matter what happens, I did get here, and I did tell the truth, and I have spoken up for what I've been carrying on my back reluctantly for 6 years.
Thank you. No further questions.
All right. Did you want to take lunch at this point, or just, okay, all right, let's do that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and take lunch this time. Do not discuss this case with anybody, and don't do any outside research, okay? Thank you. And don't break anything on your way out. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So just a reminder that since you are back on the stand, do not discuss this case with anybody, to include your attorneys at this point, okay? If you could just have a seat back there. We do have some other issues to take care of. Before we take care of the third-party motion, can I have the attorneys come forward on our Tobin?
Yes, Your Honor.
How you doing, sir?
Very well, thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Tobin. If you could just come to the center. Okay.
May I approach?
Sure.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. Give it to the other side. All right.
Good to see you.
Mr. Tobin, if you want to.
Certainly, Your Honor. Thank you.
I got to make this relatively short, as you can understand, but I wanted to take up your motion. I have read your motion and the declaration and everything attached to it in all the cases, and I have reviewed it, so I'd rather you not regurgitate that based on our time limit, but anything you wish to add to that is fine. If you want to, if I could focus you a little
Please.
bit. Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. And yes, sir. As far as your comments about Virginia Rule of Evidence 2:508, that's a criminal rule of evidence, so that's not your
Understood, Your Honor.
not your strongest argument. And as far as what goes on is when the or if the witness testifies, whether it's hearsay or it's third-party knowledge, that's something I'll deal with at trial. So again, not what I'm concerned with. As far as Supreme Court Rule 314, which I would like you to talk a little bit about that as far as intervention. And I got to tell you where I'm at right now. The concern, the issue I have with the argument is intervention obviously would make you a plaintiff or defendant in the case, and it has to deal with an issue that's germane to this case, and this is a defamation case. So if you could just tailor your argument to that issue, sir.
Sure. I'm happy to address the intervention. For the record, Your Honor, Charles Tobin from the law firm of Ballard Spahr.
Yes,
here
sir, Mr.
representing TMZ, which is the publisher of news and entertainment for the celebrity and entertainment industry. And Your Honor, we're seeking to intervene simply to protect the relationship between reporters and their sources when it comes to reporting news in the public interest. As the court noted, we really don't have a dog in this hunt as far as Mr. Depp misheard. We're really here purely on the First Amendment-based issue of reporters' privilege and reporters and their sources. Your Honor, the intervention rule, as the court is aware, allows intervention by anybody where the issue is germane to the subject matter of the proceeding. And certainly, Your Honor, the purported testimony, the proffered testimony of a former employee of TMZ who purports to be in a position to disclose confidential information learned during the operation of journalism, during his work as a journalist, is a germane issue that is being raised in this case. And, Your Honor, we would point the court to the Taft's, Fletcher, Malden, and Reed versus Southern Bank and Trust case, 213 Virginia Circuit, Lexus, 253. It's a Norfolk Circuit Court decision from 2013. And there it was an interpleader action. The funds had been interpleaded into the court by two trust companies that were fighting over it. And the man who had sold his property, who had no interest in the funds themselves, intervened in the case because he was uncertain as to his liability for excess funds, which was an issue that was not directly in litigation between the two parties. It was not part of the cause of action between the two trusts fighting over the money that had been pleaded into the court. The circuit court held that certainly the rights of that man was going to be affected by the decision making in the case. He would be prejudiced if he didn't have an opportunity to intervene, and no party was in a position to assert his rights. And so similarly here, Your Honor, TMZ is a news organization. It routinely accepts information, as is common in journalism, under exchanges of promises of confidentiality. If it is not able to intervene in this action, and neither of the parties is going to be in a position to assert the reporter's privilege, it is TMZ's journalist privilege that we're talking about, then the rights are certainly going to be prejudiced.
But if the witness, in all the cases, and I reviewed the cases that you had, in those cases the witness was compelled to testify and came and was forced to testify, so there was an issue about the privilege of the witness. It's my understanding in this case this witness wants to testify and is not under subpoena.
He has been subpoenaed, Your Honor.
That's incorrect, Your Honor. He's voluntarily, a subpoena from this court would not be enforceable.
Okay.
On the witness compelled.
Your Honor, I have a copy of a subpoena that was entered last night compelling Mr. Tremaine to give testimony in this case. And so he is coming under a compulsion under
Well,
subpoena.
and
I'm-
if he takes a stand and he asserts some sort of privilege, then that's something I will deal with at that time.
Sure, but I'm here because of the scenario where he may not assert that privilege.
Right, exactly, and that's,
And
that's
his
that's
team-
why I'm saying all your cases that you showed were the opposite, where they did assert the privilege.
Well, it is a unique situation.
Right,
where-
and I understand you might have some issues with a former employee, and you have some avenues to go deal with that.
But once he testifies and the privilege is waived, we have lost our opportunity to intervene and to
understand, sir.
intercede.
All right.
And, Your Honor, the privilege, I know, Your Honor, you said you read the case law.
I did.
Appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
But the privilege, it has been recognized by the Virginia Supreme Court in the Brown case and applied by the circuit courts uniformly. It is a very important underpinning of the relationship between reporters and sources and reporters and the public. Without the ability to enforce its promises by current employees or former employees, a news organization will have absolutely no control over being able to enforce its promises. And so we would ask the court to permit us to intervene and to assert the privilege that belongs to TMZ, which is the organization, after all, Your Honor, that would be responsible to the source if the privilege were waived.
All right, I understand, Mr. Tobin, your argument. I appreciate it very much. Okay, did the parties wish to be heard?
Good afternoon, Your Honor. I'd like to begin where Your Honor began. As a threshold matter, the court should deny TMZ's motion to intervene. Intervention is not appropriate for the reasons suggested in Your Honor's questions. As Your Honor is well aware, intervention is only appropriate with leave of court where a third party seeks to, quote, file a pleading to intervene as a plaintiff or as a defendant to assert any claim or defense germane to the subject matter of the proceeding, unquote. Virginia Supreme Court Rule 3:14. As Mr. Tobin, to his credit, has conceded, TMZ is not asking to file a pleading. It cannot properly categorize itself either as plaintiff nor defendant, and it seeks to assert no claim or defense germane to the subject matter of this action. Moreover, even if the privilege were applicable, which is not the case here, the testimony intended is directly relevant and would outweigh any qualified privilege. Quote, an intervener must be asserting an interest that is part of the subject matter of the litigation, unquote, Hudson versus Jarrett, 269 Virginia 24 at 32. Here, as Mr. Tobin stated, TMZ seeks to protect potential information solicited from a third-party witness, which is in no way a matter before this court, citing Commonwealth versus Gill, 89 Virginia Circuit 323, a 2014 case denying a motion to intervene where the intervener filed it, quote, to protect a property right, not a matter before the court, unquote. The outcome of this trial will not affect TMZ, and it does not have a sufficient interest in the subject matter of this suit to intervene. See Texas Fletcher, Maiden and Reed, PC versus Bank National Trust Co., 2013 Westlaw 5849140, granting, and this is distinguishing it, granting the motion to intervene where the intervener's liability would be affected by the outcome of the litigation. Finally, Your Honor, TMZ lacks standing to object to testimony by a third party in this action because TMZ, as Your Honor pointed out, is not being compelled to testify. TMZ's reliance on the Philip Morris case for the proposition that the privilege cannot be circumvented by seeking confidential source information from an employee is inapposite. 36 VA Circuit at 1. For one thing, as noted in that case, there is no testimonial privilege akin to that enjoyed under the Fifth Amendment, which would allow a reporter to refuse to appear before a grand jury and answer questions. And Philip Morris, as Your Honor is aware, the party issued a third-party subpoena for records to trace confidential sources. Philip Morris is inapposite here, as that case related, as this case is related to witness testimony, not records. As Your Honor suggested, TMZ's quarrel, if any, is with Mr. Tremaine to the extent that he had an NDA that was enforceable, applicable, and that's not what we're hearing from Mr. Tobin. So to the extent that TMZ, which is not exactly Edward R. Murrow, Your Honor, to the extent they have a beef, as it were, a cognizable beef, it is with Mr. Tremaine. It is not with Mr. Depp, and they clearly do not have standing to assert or to intervene because they are not intervening as a party, plaintiff, or defendant. So we respectfully submit, to the extent the court disagrees, I can go into the arguments
That's
why
right,
the
sir.
privilege is inapplicable, but I will
All right,
reserve that.
Thank you. All right, yes, ma'am?
Your Honor, I would like to weigh in from just a different perspective,
Okay.
and that is because we're trying to deal with some important issues of privilege, et cetera. But from our perspective, representing Ms. Hurd, we have issues with this witness separately, and I want to make them very clear for the record. This is somebody who should have been identified in discovery, was never. Second of all, it's not relevant whether, apparently what they're saying he's going to testify, and we have not had the opportunity to discover that, is he's going to claim that someone leaked to TMZ that Ms. Hurd was going to obtain the TRO on that Friday and also leak the video, the kitchen video with Mr. Depp being rather violent. I'm almost certain he's not going to claim it's Ms. Hurd, so I think it's never going to come in.
All right, Ms. Berghoff, I understand all that argument. Do you have any argument as to this particular motion?
No, my
Okay, well, then we can address
well,
your.
my point is, though, if you balance the prejudice versus the probative value, I don't even see how he can come in on foundation or hearsay or relevance.
That's just not part of this motion at this time. Thank you, ma'am. All right, Mr. Tobin, your motion, you get the last word, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. You know, I appreciate that the court shook your head when he made the snarky comment that this is not Edward R. Murrow. Obviously, the First Amendment applies to everybody, citizens, the New York Times, or TMZ. And this is a First Amendment-based privilege. Your Honor, the Philip Morris case is actually a very good case to answer Your Honor's question about the intervention of somebody else in order to assert the privilege. There, ABC was a defendant in the case, and it moved in order to prevent other people, the phone company.
Right. But they were already in
airlines.
the case in that particular
I understand.
matter.
There is no other mechanism, though, and so it would be an interesting procedural issue for appeal, Your Honor, whether a journalism organization or anybody else who's a First Amendment holder would be denied intervention on a constitutional-based privilege. I also, just for the record and for the merits of the case, if I understood Mr. Chu correctly, he said this is not an issue in the litigation. This does not relate to an issue in the litigation. Well, if it's not an issue in the litigation, if it's not part of a prima facie part of the defense, part of the allegations of the complaint, if it's impeachment evidence, if it's collateral to the main issues in the case, under the Brown v. Commonwealth decision under the Virginia Supreme Court, under the application of that privilege in the Philip Morris versus ABC News, it is not supposed to be compelled in this case.
Which is, again, it's not being compelled, it appears.
Well, he is appearing by subpoena, and it is a compulsory process, and he will have an obligation unless he asserts privilege under oath. But it is our privilege, Your Honor. It's not an employee, a loyal or a rogue employee's privilege to waive on behalf of its employer. This is an unusual situation.
Tell me about it.
But the answers are there in the law, and it is a First Amendment concern.
This is not the first unusual situation in this case. I can
For either
tell you
of us,
for Mr. Tobin.
for anybody here, I'm sure.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you coming in today, and I
Thank you,
appreciate
Your
your
Honor.
arguments. Yes, sir. Thank you. All right, in this matter, under Virginia Rule Supreme Court 3:14, a new party may intervene as a plaintiff or defendant to assert any claim or defense germane to the subject matter of the proceeding. A new party may not intervene unless they assert some right involved in the underlying litigation. A party is not entitled to intervene merely because a byproduct of the litigation adversely impacts them, and the decision to allow intervention is within the broad discretion of the trial court. Here, the rights asserted are not germane to the trial. The central issues in this case are whether defendant defamed plaintiff and whether plaintiff defamed defendant through a theory of vicarious liability. The issue of the confidentiality of sources has not come up as in other cases cited by EHM, which is the corporation that TMZ belongs to, is under their umbrella. In Brown versus the Commonwealth, there was an attempt by the criminal defendant to subpoena institutions in order to obtain the name of the confidential source. When the author of the article was subpoenaed, she refused to identify her confidential source on the stand. And in this case, it appears that the witness is willing to state the name of the confidential source without being compelled voluntarily. Whether that breaches a non-disclosure agreement between Mr. Tremaine and EHM is not germane to this matter and can be litigated in a separate matter if EHM so chooses. And while breaches of contract must be taken seriously, and the court does, any alleged breach is not germane to the underlying litigation here. That contractual action has no bearing on this case and is thus not germane to this litigation. Therefore, I'll deny the non-party EHM Productions motion to intervene.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank
For
you.
the record, I've known Mr. Tobin for several years. I meant no snarkiness toward him.
Well, you're just a snarky guy. Yeah,
Procedural issue for the record.
Ashley, Mr.
Your Honor, I am concerned that we preserve the issue fully, and so.
For the record, yes,
For the
sir.
record. And so I would ask, may I have the opportunity to object when Mr. Tremaine is questioned by question?
No, sir, you're not a party to this case. However, I will note for your record your objection to his complete testimony on behalf of your client.
Right, thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Your microphone, Ms. Berger.
As with the Hicksville witness, Your Honor, I would ask that we could voir dire him before the jury to find out when he contacted counsel and when they became aware of it. And I think also, under the circumstances, in fairness, I think we should at least be able to ask him what he's going to claim.
Response.
Your Honor, I don't think that's appropriate. Certainly, I don't think a proffer is necessary or appropriate in this case.
I'm not going to do a proffer in this matter, okay? All right. Oh, Mr. Rottenberg, I
Sorry.
was almost at lunch.
I know, I'm so sorry. But truly, I truly am the messenger here, because Mr. Murphy just informed me that he has to just clarify one thing
Give me
about.
just one clarification.
Okay,
Your Honor,
all right,
Lily.
okay.
I apologize.
That's fine. I think we need Ms. Myers. All right. So court will be in recess. Let's come back at 2 so everybody gets an hour for lunch, okay? All right, 2 o'clock.
All rise.
we think is doable.
If Republicans dig in and there's simply no common ground,
I don't want to
would you
say,
carve out the
I don't want
filibuster?
to, here, you're talking about something that basically, if you have Democrats and Republicans that can come to agreement and put something out there, and they're willing to, as a Democrat or a Republican, and maybe it's not in their political comfort zone, they're willing to do it, and we couldn't get 70, we'll talk then. If we can't get 60, 70 or more votes, we'll talk then.
Do you think your Republican colleagues are beholden to the gun in lobbying industry like some